So what we want to do tonight is really three different things. And the first thing is to reflect on the simulation experience. We want to make sure to give us time to make sense of what did we just do in that last session. We really didn't have a whole lot of time to check in with you afterwards, and we're just really curious, what was your experience like in your breakout teams, and what did each day look like as it unfolded on the mountain? So we're going to spend some time doing that, both as a whole group and then as some small group breakouts. We're also going to really synthesize all the lessons that we've explored. So if you think about it, we have spent some time learning about Google's characteristics of teams. We've spent some time hearing from some of our alums about what are some of the most important aspects of building a team. We've also talked about shared leadership and what that means, and you've also experienced it through the simulation. So we're going to synthesize a lot of those lessons for you. But most importantly, and this is what Paul and Abby and I care most about, and it's that you leave this program with some ideas of how you can better be a part of and participate and lead effective teams. So we're going to give you that final challenge of how do you put these particular lessons into action. So that's what we're going to do today. But let's start with thinking about the simulation back on Tuesday. So what I want you to do is sort of transport yourself back to that final moment where your team decided what you were going to do on day 6, and then you immediately got the results of what happened. I want you to think about what is one word that describes the emotion you felt when you completed the simulation. And just take a moment and think about that word, and please go ahead and put that in the chat so we get a quick sense of what were you thinking, what were you feeling in that final moment of the simulation. So go ahead and put that in the chat when you have a moment. Okay, I'm seeing a good variety of words here, everything from stress to relief, from oh crap to acceptance. Good. A lot about trust and preparedness. Yeah, hey, thanks so much for showing us. And what I want to do now is get some insight into what your experience was like. And so let's take a step back into the past a little bit further. So we were just talking about day 6. Let's go back to day 1, and let's hear a little bit about what your experience was like in day 1. So feel free to unmute yourself. You remember we started last session. Paul gave a quick intro on what the simulation was about. We opened it up. You started at base camp. I'd love to hear from a few of you. What were you thinking and feeling on day 1?
It's like I can say like what I felt. Day 1 and day 2, like they weren't that hard. I think that my team and I like managed to get through it, and we made like the best decisions. We started to feel like the complexity of the game and how hard the simulation is at day 4. Like when we started to have like some oxygen problems, and like 1 or 2 of my teammates felt like they were at risk. So yeah, like I think it was a great simulation, but at the first 2 days we didn't really like have any troubles.
Okay, thanks, Celine. I appreciate that. So you felt like day 1, day 2, pretty straightforward, right? You were sort of going through the motions. Okay. What about other teams? How did you experience the first day or 2?
Anticipation.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I was just curious to see what exactly it was, how it was going to unfold in terms of everyone's health and stuff.
Okay. And what were some of the key topics of conversation that you were talking about in your team? And this is not just for you, Jack, but for everyone. What were some of the things that you were discussing?
Jack and I were on the same team, and I know one topic because I had to make the decision at each day is the weather, and we got the weather correct the first 2 days, and then kind of jinxed ourselves, and then started to not correctly predict that. So then that would, throw off health and stuff like that. So usually health and the weather were the two things we talked about, and if we were going to move up or not, which it was funny to see at the end of the last on Tuesday how a lot of teams split up. We didn't end up splitting up and we kind of stayed as a unit, which I don't know if that hurt us or not, but I think we kind of thought more as how are we going to help each other and how's the team going to progress rather than the individual.
I agree.
Oh, okay. So what I heard in that, Jack, was sort of a conversation about individual versus sort of team aspects there. Yeah, okay. Good. What about some of the teams that were had a new member? You know, we had to make some last minute decisions based on the conditions of the mountain to reassign some of the teams. What about those individuals who were reassigned to a team, or the teams that had a new member as you came in? What was that experience like?
I mean, I could keep talking about our team. Jack was the new member that was added, and like it wasn't like anything like crazy. It wasn't like him coming in kind of threw anything off or stuff like that. I think that it did play into an account because we didn't necessarily know what role he was gonna do, and like we kind of had the other things like planned out, but obviously like we needed the fifth person to do it, and Jack was very helpful throughout it. So I don't think that it really did that much, but I think it did like give that initial like, okay, we don't know who this person is and like what the person is going to do. I think that some of my other team members did personally like know him, but I did not. So
Yeah, and we didn't know. We actually had two new people in our group. They split the marathoner role, I believe, and we didn't know them, but they came in. They both seemed to be, like it didn't seem to be that much of a struggle to acclimate them to our group. I think we all just kind of gelled together pretty well, which definitely was a good thing. I guess the goofiest thing was like figuring like since they were both brand new and they were both like figuring out their role at like you know basically on the job as it started was definitely, I guess that was one small hurdle to overcome, but that was not even that's really was mostly an afterthought by the time the simulation was over. It didn't end up being a very big deal.
Great, thanks, Gabe, for sharing. So it sounds like as the days went on and maybe you sort of figured out some of the role pieces, what other dynamics started to emerge within your team? As Salim had mentioned, some of the challenges came your way. What were some of the dynamics you observed going on in your team?
I'll speak to this. One of the things that I started to notice as one of the new people, even trying to fit into that role that wasn't assigned, I'll say I was probably the most inconvenient role with all the medical problems I had. But really, with that came the clashing of different interests. So the team really had to take a step back and say, well, this is what you need to accomplish. Like I, for instance, didn't need. My goal wasn't to make it all the way up. I wanted to make it to the fourth camp. So really we made that decision together to split up, and everyone will still be there to help each other if we can, but it's really a matter of also allowing people to make it to whatever their goal may be, because I'm not going to use some of the resources if I really don't need to make it all the way to the top. So we really had to go about that compromise and really understanding what everyone needed as individuals.
Great, thanks, Clayton. And how did you and even folks from other teams, how did you share that information? You each had a sort of communication idea or method before the sessions, but how did you go about sharing information during the simulation?
Well, I think it really depended on everyone's like individual role that they selected, how much that role or that person was really inclined to share. I know mine. It said I didn't really want to come out and say that I didn't want to go all the way to the top, so I sort of had to, I guess, play that game where I'm like, oh well, it's okay. You guys keep going. I don't want to use your resources, stuff like that. So it made it tricky knowing that you really weren't supposed to communicate everything, but you could still find a way to do it, as you have to do sometimes with teams.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. What about some of the decision-making processes? I'm curious, how did each team go about making some of these decisions? So you had specific roles with specific information, and then certainly the leader role. I'm curious, how did your teams make your decisions?
In general, we tried to get everyone to say like just about how well they were doing, their health and so forth. And then based on the weather and people's risk for certain things, try to decide as a team whether we should proceed or if it was too risky. So we would essentially just share where we all were and debate whether we thought we should go on or not.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So yes, sounds like provided an opportunity for everyone to share some perspectives and sort of bring out the information and then make a consensus-based decision. Okay, great. Well, is there anything else or noteworthy that you'd like to share to this whole group about how your journey unfolded in these 6 days that's really relevant to our conversation today? Okay.
I would say for our team, just being able to like on every decision, even though like Jack had to do the weather, like we were still like we were all in it, and it wasn't just one person like making the decisions. Like even though Peter was our leader, like he was like always asking for our feedback. Jack was always asking, like everybody was asking for feedback, and in terms of like for Sarah for medical, if like we needed for medical supplies, like we just were checking in, and it wasn't like a solo type of gig where like other people chose to like try to get to themselves. And then like in the blurb they said for Peter, like this was his last chance as leader to get to the mountain, and he's got to weigh the fact that like he might have to go there himself and he might have to leave people behind, but that wasn't the motif of our game strategy per se. It was, we just wanted to get there together. So that was basically how our team chemistry went down.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Matthew. Yeah. Well, what I want to do now, before we go into just some small group conversations about the reflective piece, I just wanted to show a summary of each team, goals achieved, and then the specific challenges, so you can get a sense of the breadth here. And as I share this, I want to be clear that it's really not all about accomplishing the goals. That's one indication of success, right? When we think about effective teams, there's certainly more indicators. I think from the simulation standpoint, this is the information that they particularly track. But I wanted to give you a sense of this, because what matters most about the simulation is certainly not whether we've accomplished all the goals, but what we take from this experience. So I wanted to share with you just the summary of all the teams and goals. So you can see the list of teams here in one column, goals have achieved, and then each particular challenge. And a thumbs up means that challenge was completed, and an explosion means that that challenge was not completed. So just take a look at that. And I'd love to hear if there are any sort of quick reactions based on what you see here for our whole collective program.
Happy to see the cliffhangers got a high score. That was my group, the one I was in.
One of the things I noticed first is that none of the groups got the oxygen challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to note, Abby, Paul, and I were talking about this before. And, you know, when we did the simulation, we certainly did not complete that one as well. So that one is particularly difficult, I think.
What was the oxygen challenge? Which one was that one again?
So that's when you had a limited supply and had to determine who particularly needs oxygen based on their health conditions in that moment.
Gotcha.
Well, good. Well, I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to see this. Now what I want us to do is break out into small groups to talk not just about what happened, but what we can take from it, right? What is it that we can actually learn from this experience? And so what I want you to do is discuss these particular questions as a team. And we're going to give you about 15 minutes in these conversations. So we want you to just generally evaluate, you know, how did your team define success, and how would you evaluate that based on the experience? Then I want you to think about what are the lessons that you learned through this program that you noticed in action. So I heard a few of those start to come out through some of Matthew's comments and Jack. But what are some of the lessons that you saw in action? What is it that people specifically did that demonstrated effective teamwork? And then the third point, we want to identify what were the pressure points. And it might be different for us individually, right? So this is a good chance to share with each other what were some of these moments of stress that came out, and what did you notice about how the team responded based on that? And then finally, based on the lessons of the program, what would you do differently if you participated in another effective team? How would you change that? So we're putting those questions in the chat, and when we come back from the breakout groups, what we're going to do is actually ask each team to report out. And we want you to report out on questions 3 and 4. So we want you to share at least, you know, what is one major challenge that you had, or one sort of moment of challenge. And then the second part is, what is one lesson that you would do differently? Okay. So we'll go ahead and put that in the chat as well, so you can know that. But yeah, we're going to have each team report out, and then we're going to show that and chart that for the group. So any questions before we do the breakouts? Okay, Paul, are we ready to go with the breakouts?
We are. Please accept them. If I, for some reason, put you in the wrong room and you're not with your team, feel free to come back to the main room and we'll get you in the right place. See you all in a bit.